Hey everyone, it's Eric Rochow from Garden Fork Radio. I'm your host, and today Mike is not here. Usually right about here, Mike would go, hello, but he's not here. Mike has got a lot on his plate right now with work for the next couple of weekends, and I said, hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to do this, and we're doing it solo here. We're going to try this. I thought I would try and get one of my friends or perhaps the camera operator, but scheduling did not work out. So we are sitting in Brooklyn right here. The Labradors are asleep next to me here. They might wake up and try and coax me into throwing them a rawhide or something like that. But I thought I would try this and see what happens. If it's boring, let me know. All right. Usually, it's nice to have Mike around because it's kind of a way to bounce in a way. You know, you kind of have someone to kind of tell me I'm doing something stupid usually, but here we go. All right. I have a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about. Mike actually was nice enough to make a list, and I think a lot of this we're going to save for when Mike is around. But recently in the Edible Brooklyn magazine, which is a really, I think it's a really well done magazine. You can learn more about it at ediblebrooklyn.com. And it is part of I don't know what the right word is, but it's called the Edible Communities. And they have Edible Chicago, they have Edible Los Angeles. And if I could find the website here, if you go to ediblebrooklyn.com, it will link to the mother site, I guess. And you can see if they have a magazine for your area as well. They have one for Edible East End, Edible Manhattan, of course, because New York City is the culinary capital of the world. Right, Mike? And by the way, I have been thinking about Italian beef, and I haven't really heard about anyone in New York knowing about it. So we'll find that out. Charlie Pup is getting up. Okay, she's going back down again. I can't find the Edible Communities. I think it's ediblecommunities.com. Anyway, in here, they were talking about fishing on the East River, and they have a really great photo of a fella. He's on a pier with the Manhattan skyline, and it's a really great picture. And there are a bunch of kind of really beat up, decaying piers. There are some in Red Hook, and there are some in Williamsburg, and a lot of that area is becoming developed all of a sudden. It's putting these big co-op condo buildings there. But you can still access the waterfront in some areas, and there are people who are fishing in the East River. And for decades, perhaps a century, the East River has been kind of like the Lake Erie of New York City. There has been quite a bit of pollution in it. There is still some waterways in New York City that do have quite a pollution problem. But you can actually eat fish out of the East River. You just can't eat it every day. You can also have fish out of the Hudson. It's just not something you want to eat every day. And New York Bay as well. But it's a very cool article. It's an article about a guy named Ben Sargent who has a site called BrooklynChowderSurfer.com, and he has a fishing derby. He also has made a couple of fishing videos, which I really like. And he has a radio show on the Heritage Radio Network as well. And there are links to that at his site, Brooklyn Chowder Surfer. But this kind of brings up what I've been thinking about for a while, and that I am going to start fishing again. Excuse me there. I don't have a mute button here. Oh. Anyway, when I was a kid, growing up in Wisconsin, we used to go fishing all the time. There were a number of ponds right near our house, and we would ride our bikes. I had a little rig. It basically was like a piece of PVC pipe connected to the back of my bike, so I could stick my rod and reel in there. It was a lightweight spinning reel, and I'd strap my tackle box on, and we'd get like northern pike and bass and bluegill and perch. There's a number of quarries around. There's also a number of just ponds. And when I moved to New York City, I really didn't fish anymore. And it's kind of coming full circle because my father, and I believe my uncle as well, when they were growing up in New York City, they started out in the Lower East Side and they moved to the South Bronx, two really nice places back then. They would go fishing. And I remember as a kid when we lived in New Jersey, my dad would go fishing for a bluefish, and it would be my job to throw all the heads in the trash bag. And of course now, people would take those fish heads and make stock out of them or cut the cheeks out because I think the cheek has a really nice piece of flesh in there. But I'm going to start fishing again. And I have my choice of fishing now. I can either do some freshwater fishing up at our house where we live, or I could do some fishing down in New York while I'm doing a job down here. And my dad still has some saltwater gear. He has a couple of reels and maybe a couple of poles. So I'm going to have to talk to him about that. And there is actually a fishing tackle store in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, whose name... Can you tell how organized I am here? Where I just, I basically go through the article rather than having... It's called Dream Fishing Tackle by a guy named Robert Piskorski, who is Polish, it says here. And he has a lot of Polish clients, but he also has some regular guys who are rediscovering fishing. And through that, Ben Sargent is having his Brooklyn Fishing Derby. He had one last year, and this year it has more attention. And basically, I believe it's for the month of October. You go fishing, and then whatever you catch, if you think it's a large fish, you take a picture of it with a tape measure and the location of where you fished, where you caught it, where you fished it. And you send it in to him. So I think it's pretty cool. I like the idea of, once again, getting people interested in stuff like that, because you're knowing where your food is coming from, I told the story before, about a while ago. We went up to the camp, and I walked into the cabin, and I asked the chef, I said, what are we having for dinner? And she said, whatever they catch out of the pond. And I walked down to the pond, and another friend of mine was pulling perch out, and he had a bucket full, probably like 12 perch. And boom, dinner was 10 minutes later. So I thought that was really cool, and it kind of put the light bulb off in my head. I was like, we could catch our own food, which I really like. You know where your food is coming from. So Ben Sargent is the guy's name. It's brooklynchowdersurfer.com. He's having a fishing contest. Do you have a fishing contest in your neighborhood? We have one in a town nearby in Riverton, Connecticut. They have a fishing contest I think it's the first day of fishing in the river right there. And it's kind of cool because I haven't gone to fish there, but a bunch of people are in their waders in the river. But the fire department has a breakfast, and they make a really good scrambled egg and bacon sandwich there. You can get pancakes. So it's a neat community event, and it kind of signifies the beginning of the end of winter and the beginning of spring, which I really like. So ediblebrooklyn.com, you can read more about that. I'm going to go fishing, and I will let you know more about that. Okay? So that's the first thing on our list. Let's consult Mike's list here, and we'll see what else we can talk about here. I went to the Maker Faire, the New York City Maker Faire. Make Magazine is a magazine I really like. I think it's makezine.com is their site. And it's kind of a lot about what Garden Fork people are into. It has a bit more of an electronic and programming bent to it than probably a lot of us are used to. These guys will take what's called an Arduino controller, these microprocessor controllers, and they hook up their washing machine to Twitter and stuff like this. They're on this, they publish it quarterly, and this quarter the cover is a guy who has made a kind of a laser zapper to zap mosquitoes. I mean, who would have thought of that? But these guys, with some off-the-shelf technology can make this. So, and they also have a companion magazine called Craft, which is about knitting, kind of Etsy kind of things that people make, and either for their own pleasure or selling. And they have a Maker Faire on the West Coast. I believe it's in San Diego. So when I heard that they were having a Maker Faire in New York City, I bought a ticket, and they had it at the New York Hall of Science in Queens, which is right near where they had the New York World's Fair. You can take the 7 train out there to 111th Street, and you walk 3 blocks, and boom, you're there. And it was kind of cool because the 7 train at that end, which is way out in Queens, it's the east end of Queens, is a very Hispanic, Latino, Asian population out there. And so you could tell anyone that was on the train that far out on the line, they were probably wearing black and had maybe sideburns or a beard and a little crew cut, and you knew they were going to the Maker Faire. So it was just kind of neat. I thought that was an interesting observation, kind of like Moscow and the Hudson there. So I went. They had a couple of neat areas there. Ford Motor was there. My Ford Fiesta was there. They have a neat thing showing their new sync technology. They had this giant trailer that pulled out, and you could do all sorts of demonstrations essentially. And I said hello to them, and no one knew who I was, but that was okay. I was like, hey. Then I finally said, I was one of the Fiesta agents, and they were like, oh, hey. But the Fiesta was there. It looks really nice, and there are other cars as well. The Edge, they had an Edge out there. In addition to that, it's kind of like, what's that? What are those guys that would basically make these they'd weld together these machines that would like spit fire and crawl across the parking lot, and that the guy lost part of his hand in an accident, and I can't remember the name of it, of course, but my friend Matt would tell me that. Perhaps I will insert it in. But you've got guys that have welded together some kind of machine that has a propane tank and throws flames out the side and makes screaming noises with it. They've got some like Rube Goldberg mousetrap kind of devices that are on an oversized scale. And then they had what looked like the Make Zine also has a commerce site where they sell a lot of kits and stuff. So they had a tent full of really cool books. Giver Tully, who had a really great TED talk about 5 dangerous things to let your child do, he has a book out called 50 Dangerous Things. And I missed him. He had a table there with some demonstrations, and I went by there twice, and he was both times running around looking at other stuff, and I wanted to interview him. So maybe we can get him on a Skype call one day. And I will link to that TED conference talk. He basically, along the lines of what I believe is that kids are a little too bubble wrapped these days, and one of his big things was let kids play with fire. So, which I am into, obviously, me being the flamethrower owner. But one point I did have, I don't know if anyone is thinking about doing this, but a lot of the places I went, I would walk up to someone's table, and like one example, the guy had a book about urban homesteading, or maybe country homesteading, and he had some mushrooms he was growing out of a log. And I had my video camera, and I was videotaping the book and the mushrooms and all this stuff. And the guy was yakking behind the table with a bunch of his buddies. And I'm like, I'm not going to beg you to come out here and talk to me about what your table is about. And I just kind of walked on because, if you're out there and you have a booth, and I know not all the really creative people are also kind of extroverts, unlike me, but not that I'm very creative, but I'm just kind of an extrovert sometimes. But if you're there to reach out to people, you need to reach out to them, because if you just kind of hang back in your booth, you're not going to get that connect. And a lot of the web, I think, lacks that. And if you're in person, you've traveled far to come there. I traveled all the way from Brooklyn to come there. Make that effort, because I kind of just gave up. I was like, this looks like an interesting book, and I like the mushroom thing, but if you're going to ignore me, I'm not going to bother. So anyway. That was just Eric's little rant about, kind of marketing yourself. You need to just kind of take that step and, hey, how you doing? Hey, are you interested in mushrooms? Oh, that's a nice camera you got there. You can even talk about the weather. There's a commonality there because you're both there, so that there's a reason you're both there, and you can work from that. So I am looking into buying mushroom spore, because we dropped a birch tree along with the big pines on the side of the house. And I saved some birch logs. And one place said you should inoculate the birch logs right away so that the birch log is not infiltrated or overtaken by other funguses or bacteria or whatever pathogens. That's kind of a big word there. And then the other one said, well, just bury them half in the dirt and leave them for a year and then inoculate them with spore. So I'm not quite sure what to do there. If anyone knows anything about that, could you send me an email? Eric at what's my email address? Eric@gardenfork.tv. All right. So we're trying some new technology here. I am recording with a regular microphone hooked up through a mixer into a laptop. And I'm just poking over here to see and make sure it is still working, and it is. Okay. I just before I started recording, I had a cup of coffee real quick with Daniel Delaney, who is the host of Vendor TV and The Hungry Peddler. And Daniel has started a new endeavor, which is a weekly email about food events in New York City. It's called Eater's Digest, and you can subscribe to it at eatersdigestnyc.com. Eaters with an S, eatersdigestnyc.com, which is very cool. He's just got that energy to do all sorts of stuff. So let me read a little bit about it here. Eater's Digest NYC is a comprehensive weekly email newsletter which details New York's best food events and happenings. Once you sign up, you'll receive an email from me every Thursday listing events for the weekend and the upcoming week. I'm doing my best to list all the food events in New York City. As the site develops, I'll start to tailor the listings to the topics it seems most people are interested in. So, he's just so darn smart about this stuff. It's called eatersdigestnyc.com, and the first issue is already out, and he will be putting out one every week. If you're interested in advertising with him, there is a contact information as well. But Daniel, he's been on the show a number of times. All right, on to the list. What has Mike also given me to talk about here? I wanted to talk about the bees. So it is basically you're preparing for fall and winter now with your honeybees. And I wanted to start feeding them sugar syrup. And what you're doing is because you've pulled honey off the hives, you want to make sure that even if you don't pull honey off your hives, you want to make sure that your bees have enough food to get through the winter. And what you do with that is you feed them, you take cane sugar or granulated sugar, you mix it with really, really warm water, not boiling water. And I do 2 pounds of sugar to 1 pound of water, and a pint of water weighs 1 pound. Okay, so it's a pint to a pound is what they say. And I add a little bit of the essential oil recipe we have, which is on our site. It's basically lemongrass and spearmint or wintergreen. Be very careful with it. Follow the directions on the site, okay? I put a teaspoon of that into every gallon of it. And I also added, because the first gallon that you feed each beehive, we put in some fumigillin, which, is a drug. I think it's considered, but it helps them with what's called nosema, which is essentially like a dysentery disease that the bees can get in the winter and in the spring because they're basically all compacted in the hive. When it's cold out, they don't do cleansing flights, and bees don't go to the bathroom in the hive. They only go to the bathroom outside the hive. So you can imagine being cooped up for a number of weeks or months. That can cause some gastrointestinal things. So the fumigillin helps with that. And I don't think it's a bad thing. And so I give it to my bees. It's a very accepted treatment for beekeepers to do. Anyway, I went down to the hives at Maple Knoll Farm. We have 2 hives down there. And I remembered from a while ago, we had pulled 2 frames from hive number 2 to harvest a bit of honey out of that one. They had enough to get through the winter, and I thought, let's pull just a couple. And I was interested to see, do you hear that? They're making noises. The Labradors are. I was interested to see whether the honey from one hive would taste the same as the honey from the hive right next to it. It was just kind of a very unscientific experiment. So we pulled 2 frames out of hive number 2, which is robust enough to do that right now. And I had forgotten to put those frames back in the super. So there's 4 medium supers in this beehive, and I had forgotten to throw these 2 frames in the top super. There's usually 10 frames in each box or super, and so there's only 8. And so there was this big space on the one side of the super. And so then you have an inner cover, basically a piece of masonite with little wood on the ends. Then you have your outer cover, and we use the metal ones in the summer and the polystyrene ones in the winter. So I popped off the outer cover. And first of all, the one mistake was I forgot to bring wood chips for my smoker. I found that some pine needles and wood chips work best for me. The chippers that come out of a tree chipper. You can get those from your parks department or your neighbor, or wherever. But they work really well for me. And pine needles, just grab them out of the yard. Anyway, I forgot to do that. And I was like, well, I went over there just to throw these 2 frames back in. And I went to pop off the inner cover. And I pulled it up a little bit, and I was like, why is this thing so heavy? And then I saw it. The bees had drawn honeycomb down off the inner cover in the space where I had forgot to replace the frames. And there were 2 big pieces of comb sticking down, and they were full of honey. And what it really looked, of course, I was alone, and I left my cell phone in the car, and I've got my hands full of an inner cover with a honeycomb on it. It was a beautiful sight. I don't know if you've ever looked at a top bar hive, but it looked like that, where basically have a piece of wood going across, there are strips of wood going across the top of the hive, and you pull up like this 1-inch wide strip, and the bees have drawn comb off the bottom of it from the, and it looked amazing. But I had to get these 2 frames back in there for the winter. Well, I felt I needed to, because I thought if it would just make it easier to take the hive apart when we need to. So I finally got the inner cover off, and I had these 2 pieces of comb in my hand. And what I thought was, I'm going to take the honeycomb, essentially burr comb is what you would consider it, and I put it in the sugar feeder, which sits on the top of the hive. And we use a sugar feeder. It's made by Brushy Mountain, and I think it's probably the best one out there. It basically has 2 troughs with a wooden float in each one, so it allows the bees to climb into the sugar, eat it, because they're floating on this little wooden raft, essentially. But anyway, what I did was I took the honeycomb and I put it in the 2 troughs, then I put the feeder back on there, and these bees were not happy with me. And we have to backpedal a little bit, because previously in the day, I had gone to my neighbor's house in a nearby town and helped him. We were going to combine 2 hives, a really weak hive and a good hive. And I'd gotten stung. And I'd gotten stung through my Carhartts, actually. I wear the black Carhartt dungarees. And I think I might have to wear the double need Carhartts from now on. But what I had forgotten that I'd been stung earlier in the day. So I had the sting or warning pheromone on me when I went to go work on our bees. And the bees were really aggressive, and they were bonking me. And as I'm pulling this thing up, one of them stings me on one of my fingers. And this bee stung me on my ring finger. So that causes a couple problems. First of all, when one bee stings you, it releases a pheromone, and it's an alarm pheromone, basically. And it gets all the other bees very agitated. You're essentially ripping their hive apart, because you're pulling all this honeycomb off. And you're basically like a bear to them. You're stealing their food. So they get quite agitated. My smoker has no smoke in it. So I worked as fast as I could. I took the broken pieces of comb. I put it in the hive top sugar feeder that we use. I dropped that back on, and I closed it all up. And I did manage to put the 2 empty frames back in, the ones that we had pulled the honey out of. And my thinking is they're going to pull the honey out of that broken comb and fill back up the empty frames that I put in there. I'm going to go look at them this weekend. But there's a couple lessons there. Make sure you have the fuel for your smoker. You can buy fuel. It's basically looks like it's like cotton rag or something like that, or it looks like sawdust. I use the wood chips. But Jim Fisher, our teacher in our beekeeping class, one of the first things he said was, don't wear jewelry, or perfume for that matter, when you're working with bees. Especially if you have like a titanium ring on your finger, because if you get stung on your hand and your fingers swell up and you go to the emergency room, if you have one of those super titanium rings, they can't cut it. They can cut gold, they can cut silver. They can't cut these uber metals or palladium or titanium or whatever they are. So something to think about there. But my finger really swelled up, and it was my wedding ring finger. And luckily it's gone down. If I lost some weight, I could probably get this ring off of here, but that's another big hint to Eric. Anyway, it was really cool. It was just this beautiful comb. And I'm going to go back next week and check on them. And our other hive number 1, which is the Uber hive, has 5 mediums on it. And I usually leave 4 mediums on a hive to go through the winter. Some people might do 3, but up in Northwest Connecticut, it gets really cold. And last year, I left 4 mediums on both our hives, and they made it through just fine. And there was still food in the top of the hive. And so maybe I'm being over cautious here. Maybe somebody else might do 3 mediums, but I'm going to stay with 4. But the Uber hive has 5 supers on it still. And I'm going to take a look at the top medium. And if the 5th super is full of honey, I'm going to pull it and give them the 4 supers for the winter. So we will have an additional honey harvest. Also, I haven't fed the medicated syrup to either one of those. And if you have fed your bees medicated syrup, or if you fed them any of the essential oil, either in a syrup or just dousing them with a sugar, spray, you don't want to harvest the honey because it's going to take on the flavor of those essential oils. So you're going to have lemongrass honey, which would be a bad thing. But I'm kind of excited to check that out. This one hive we have it just goes like crazy. And I want to experiment with next spring doing a split on that hive when it's about to swarm, and letting take a split off. In other words, we're going to take some of the queen cells that are on the frames, because the bees are getting ready to divide the hive to populate their... Basically, that's how they multiply, is half the hive leaves and starts a new hive. So we're kind of artificially going to cause that by pulling a bunch of the frames out, but those frames will have the queen bee cells on them, put them in a new hive. And I want to see if I can kind of cultivate a Northwest Connecticut queen that is really robust. So we'll have to see. I have to look at the hive, the varroa mite population, and see how it's going there. But this one hive is amazing. I don't know if it just happens to be the environment they're in, because it's a really lush area with all these fields, or is it the queen? We got the queen by luck. I mean, we bought the queen in a package from from Guy Hodges down in Southeast Connecticut there. So we'll see. We'll see about that. That was kind of a long ramble about bees, wasn't it? So we're not going to talk about pinball because Mike is not here. I imagine he's taken another weekend and gone to some other state, perhaps Kalamazoo or something, to buy a pinball machine. I don't know. I think that's fine. So we've been yakking for a while here. I got a very interesting email from a guy named Dave, and he was asking a question about bees. He said, I'm considering some bees to assist in pollinating my orchards. My concern is that in a spring like this year, the trees bloomed much earlier than the rest of the wildflowers or garden plants, and I'm concerned about the bees not having enough to eat in my dry pine forest in early spring. Once the garden is up and running and or wildflowers are blooming in the summer, I think they'd be okay. Strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries were fine as they bloomed later than the apples. The alternative would be to hand pollinate, which is mildly impossible with a few trees, but without the added honey. So here's what I think about this. I think if you are in a small open area surrounded by woods, I don't think that's the ideal place for bees. We basically have an acre of open area, and we are then surrounded by forest where we live in Connecticut here. So, and the one hive we had in the yard didn't do really well. I think the bees had to travel long distances to find enough food. The forest doesn't provide enough for bees, I think. It's my opinion. Other people might have a different opinion. Like maple trees bloom really early in the year, and you actually probably can't see the flower, but that is a key flower in the New England for honeybees. But I think through the year, I don't know if they're going to have enough food. What people do to get bees through late winter and early spring is they don't depend on these plants to bloom. They feed them sugar syrup. It's a 1-to-1 solution. It's 1 pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. Again, we put the essential oil little additive in there. There's also a commercial version called Honey Bee Healthy. We make a homemade version, and it was invented by a fellow who we link to on the site. So I don't know. It just depends on how much open space you have around you. And my biggest suggestion would be to ask a local beekeeper, or find out if there's a local beekeeping society or club in your area, or check with your county extension. There may very well be a designated beehive. In Connecticut, there's a hive inspector guy. He's the state apiarist, I think is the word. Ask them what they think. They're more familiar with your area than I am. If you're closed in by woods, I would think twice about it, because we actually moved our hives down into the valley where there are a bunch of giant hayfields. And right now, the bees are bringing in aster pollen. And asters are the last flowers to bloom in our area. They're a fall flower. Some of them are really tiny and white. Some of them are kind of big and have purple on them. A lot of woodland aster in our area, or they basically grow along the edge of the wood, and some of them are in open. But it's really cool. They were bringing in kind of a white pollen and a yellow pollen, so that was kind of neat. But again, check your area. I think it's great that you have all that. The other thing you might consider is mason bees, orchard mason bees, which are really easy to have around. You can order them. They come in little tubes, and you can make orchard mason bee houses. Basically, you take like a 4x4, not of treated wood, and you drill. It's a specific diameter. I think it's 1/8 perhaps. And that's the perfect size that orchard mason bees like. They like a little hole in the wood, and that's where they lay the eggs for their young. And those bees are actually taking over a lot of the pollinating duties because we've had this dearth of honeybees in the United States. So orchard mason bees, I don't have a link, but if you Google that, you will find a bunch of information. You can basically buy, they look like a bundle of cardboard straws, and you just put that in a tree in the spring, and those will hatch into mason bees, and they will pollinate, and they will also lay more eggs, especially if you've put up some of these little mason bee houses. And there you go. So, just my thing. Oh man, talking by yourself is pretty amazing. Am I doing okay here? You guys, I'm sure somebody will let me know. So I'm going to take a glass of water real quick, okay? Okay. There's a couple of really neat emails, and maybe we'll go through a couple here. One is from Michael. He says, "Hi, Eric. I hope with all that you have going on, you still get a chance to read the occasional letter email." And I do. I really like to hear from you. And if I don't get back to you, it's because I'm an idiot. I just blank on stuff. But just wanted you to know I enjoy your how-to videos. I find your easygoing demeanor and relaxed sense of humor very relaxing to watch. The Zen of Eric. How cool is that? All right? That's a new thing. The Zen of Eric. I find myself watching on topics I have no intention of trying. That's been said before. That lady in France who was recuperating from her surgery said that. Other shows I watch and decide after watching you try something that I'm going to try it too, which is what Garden Fork is all about, okay? And it goes both ways. If you have something that you're doing, tell me about it. Make a video about it. Take pictures, I want to learn how to make cheese, okay, everyone? So tell me about that. I really do learn a lot from your show, not the least of which is the can-do or give-it-a-try attitude you have. I recently enjoyed 2 shows with your folks on it. They are great, pretty funny too. Yeah, they are cool. Thank you. Thanks, and keep up the good work. So there you go. Thank you, Michael. That was really, really quite nice. I am yakking. Speaking of my father, we're going to try something right now. My dad is a born and bred New Yorker. I think was he born in the Lower East Side? I'm not sure. Anyway, we have a very interesting family history. My grandfather emigrated from Europe. He, can you hear that car alarm? Maybe not. That's the beauty of New York. My grandfather on my father's side jumped ship in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. He came to New York City and found a job. He met his wife at the factory he worked in, and then he became a building super in the Bronx. All right, we'll be back with more Garden Fork after this. Garden Fork is brought to you by Allison House, providing severe weather data when you need it. Learn more at allisonhouse.com or click on their ad on the gardenfork.tv site. You're listening to Garden Fork Radio. It's cooking, gardening, and other fun stuff. Welcome back. Hey, it's Eric.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Do you want to be on Garden Fork Radio?
Sure, I'd love to be on Garden Fork Radio.
I'm recording this by myself, and I thought we need to have some people on here because I just got tired of listening to me. So.
Well, I'm sure the rest of the world does not get tired of listening to you. So.
I don't know. Anyway, I would.
Okay.
So you said something on Facebook about a brownie recipe you were working on?
Yes, I have perfected the single-serve brownie because I live alone and have late night, 9 o'clock. I would love a little brownie. So I found the recipe online and then started modifying it to, really make something that was edible instead of chewy and nasty.
So essentially, it's like a home version of the little brownie that's wrapped in cellophane at the store.
Oh, yeah, because you don't want to go anywhere. it's that night and you're like, oh, I don't want to drive anywhere. I don't want to have to get back out again.
Because you don't live in the culinary capital of the world.
No, the Midwest is not the culinary capital of the world, but we do know how to cook, so there is that. And see, there's also, you avoid the danger of keeping a whole pan of brownies in the house, which, when you visit Eric, I think you've seen the danger of that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now in my gut, so...
So, yeah, we tend to avoid that with the single-serve brownie.
The puppies are starting to whine here.
Oh, yeah, Harriet's wandering around wondering why I'm not throwing something for her, so...
Yeah, they start to. It's about 4 o'clock here, and about 4 o'clock they start lobbying for dinner. And it's like dinner happens at 5. So.
Oh yeah, I get that at 5 o'clock because dinner happens here at 6. So Harriet's going, why aren't we doing something?
What kind of little container did you use to make the brownie? Was it like a ramekin or?
Yes. Well, you have to be bigger than your average ramekin. Here's the 2 things that I had to do to really figure this out. I had to find the perfect container. And mine is this terracotta, round, maybe 1 inch deep, and, I don't know, maybe 5 inches around. But you could go smaller, you just have a thicker brownie. And just get some kind of an oven-proof, china, stoneware, something or other.
Yeah.
Little ramekins, you're just going to end up, I think, with a wedge of chocolate, which sounds kind of good, too, in a way.
Yeah.
And the other thing to know is that an egg is 3 tablespoons. So the recipe I found on the web had, egg substitute, 2 tablespoons, because that, you can use small amounts.
Right.
Well, if you beat an egg, it's 3 tablespoons. So, you just beat up an egg, you throw 2 tablespoons in your single-serve brownie, you give the other tablespoon to the dog the next day on his breakfast, and everybody's happy. And you haven't wasted your egg. And you haven't used nasty egg substitute, so.
Right. That's great. Yeah, I found I didn't realize how easy brownies were to make until Tracy came to our house once, and she just pulled the cocoa out of the cabinet and whipped up a batch of brownies in an 8x8 pan with just the recipe on the back of the cocoa thing. And now a lot of times I make that if I get kind of I just, start to have a kind of a sugar craving, I make brownies on the weekend now. So.
Yes, and 8x8 is much safer than 9x13, but for me, even single serve is even more safe than that. Except now that I know how to do it, it's really easy to do it all the time.
Well,
the other thing is to cook your brownie, don't microwave it.
Oh, yeah, microwave doesn't work.
Yeah, all the single-serve brownie recipes on the internet say microwave, bake it at 350 for about 12 to 15 minutes, you'll be all set.
Well, cool. So maybe you could share that with me and I'll post it on the site?
Yes, I will, because a couple other folks were saying, hello, Tracy, pony up. So I'll type it up and get it out to you.
All right. I tried to call Dad. I wanted to talk about fishing. There's an article about fishing in the East River that we talked about. Oh. And I remember Dad going fishing as a kid. And
yeah, he did fish in the East River, and he swam in there, too. He threw somebody in once, but...
Yeah, I'm sure there's a story
there. He might have
there.
been paid to do that, so...
But do you remember him fishing, or were you too young, or?
I just remember him ocean fishing.
Yeah.
I think he loved to do it, but he rarely came back with anything. And he's got those huge reels down in the basement, and we couldn't figure out what kind of fish he got with them, and he went out in the ocean with them. He would just walk out from the shore and fish.
Yeah, I remember he had this one big red pole with a big reel, and we were like, oh, that's for sharks.
Yes, yeah. And Mom didn't like eels or something like that.
Yeah, there's a story behind that.
She was afraid of. So, yeah, I bet there is too. So.
All right, well, cool. Well, I'm going to try and get Dad on the line maybe next week and talk about fishing because I want to start doing some fishing again. So I'm going to see what kind of tackle he might still have. So.
Oh yeah, he's got all sorts of stuff in that basement there. It's just a treasure trove down there. So.
All right, well, cool. Well, thanks for taking a minute here. We will post the recipe for the single serve brownie. That might have to be a Garden Fork video episode. And
then you can send me the cocoa you bought about 6 months ago.
Oh, yeah, there's that. I think that's the
Yeah.
cocoa I used to make the brownies recently.
Oh, yeah, that's because it's good cocoa and you can't get it here in the Midwest.
One of the last times Tracy came to visit, she bought, it's called Sacco, I think, Sacco.
Yep.
And she really likes it, but they don't sell it in the Midwest, and you can't bring it on the airplane because it's a brown powder. And if you put it in your
Yeah.
luggage, they're going to open it up and go, "What is this?" And they're not going to let it on the plane.
Nope.
So she left it at our house, and I kept on thinking, "Oh yeah, I really got to send it to her." And then one day I wanted to make brownies, so I was like, "Oh, there's some cocoa,"
Yeah, thanks.
so I have to go out and buy some and send it to you now.
It's my favorite. I've tried Trader Joe's and Ghirardelli, and really, if you can't get Seiko, then get just the Hershey's cocoa in the grocery store. Sometimes when people try so hard, things don't come out as well. So
yeah.
cocoa's one of them.
All right. Well, as we say, done is better than perfect. So.
I like that approach.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. I'll talk to you later. All right.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Hey.
We
How you doing?
have Julie and Tim Kirby here who have been on the show before. I remember that Julie was talking about her trip to Africa with the cheetahs, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yes. That was nearly a year ago now.
Yeah, but it's still fresh in my mind. So
Actually, there were some cheetahs on TV the other day that we were looking at, and it all came back, didn't it?
Oh, it did.
neat.
Yeah.
So is it about what 10 o'clock at night there right now, or?
5 to 9.
All right. So are the kids in bed?
Just. You just missed somebody scooting back upstairs. Yeah.
Oh, so it's quiet now.
Yeah. Well-ish. Yeah.
Well, cool. So I'm long story short, my co-host Mike has been really busy this week, and so we didn't get to do a regular Mike and Eric show, and so I just kind of did this solo thing here by myself, and I tried to call a couple people, and then I put out on Twitter, I said, "Who wants to talk to me?" Just Skype in on a call, and we got Julie and Tim, so yay.
Are you not overrun with calls then?
I'm not that popular.
Yeah, we thought, oh, you'll have loads of people calling.
No, I'm not, I don't know. I'm just a guy. So anyway, it's in the back of my head to say, hey, why don't you guys come back on? Because we've been talking a lot about beekeeping, and I don't know if that bores most of the audience or not. We haven't really found that out yet. It's more interesting to people than pinball, of course. But because Mike's not here, so I can make fun of him. But you guys, how was your harvest this year?
Fabulous. Absolutely one of the best years, I think.
Cool.
We've had some beautiful, beautiful honey, and we actually moved our bees. They were originally on our allotment.
Right.
But the allotment got very popular. There was lots of families, and we worried that the bees, we didn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable being gardening next to them.
Right.
So we moved them onto a farm, well out of the way of the public, and right by the river. And we weren't sure how they would do because they would be away from people's beans and, gardens and things. They'd be out in the fields. But actually, we've had the best honey ever. We have 2 hives. We lost one last winter. We have 2 hives now. We split one. And we had over 50 pound of honey this year.
Wow, that's great. That is really great.
Yeah, it's really nice honey. It's quite floral, actually.
I don't know where they've been.
Didn't you did you have to do that thing where you have to combine it with some other honey to recrystallize it or something?
We did have to do that with last year's. It had oilseed rape in it, which sets very hard.
Right.
I've still got half a bucket of very hard honey from last year I haven't done anything with.
It's a shame we don't live closer.
It's all right for cooking, but oilseed rape doesn't have a very good taste. Some people don't like it at all. Some people say it's a bit wet cabbage. It's not a nice honey. It's very bland. It doesn't taste it very much. But what they've been getting this year, admittedly because the farm that they're on, although it's got big crops of wheat or things like that, there's a lot of old hedgerows and fruit trees and things like that. So there's probably been a lot of blossom that they've been able to get.
Great.
I think that's made the honey much nicer. We haven't had the sect problems we've had with the oilseed rape. And it's been much floral. It's been perfumed. It's been absolutely gorgeous stuff. Wow.
I don't know. Do you think we can mail honey back and forth? Will they allow that in the post?
I don't know, actually.
We always worry slightly about that. It would be
Customs
nice
are
to
a bit
do
funny
that,
about things like
actually.
that, aren't they?
Yeah.
You got to be careful.
I
about
would totally send you guys some. I'd totally do
everyone-
that.
We'd swap. So how's yours been this year?
It's been really good. I yacked about it at the beginning of the show. I learned very quickly. I had helped a friend of mine combine two hives, and I had gotten stung on my pants, through my pants.
Ow.
And then I went and worked on my hives, and the bees were very aggressive. And I realized they were being aggressive partly because I'm tearing the hive apart, but also because I had the alarm pheromone on me already from being stung. So I got stung again.
Yeah.
I've had bad sting year as well, actually.
Well, what can
Oh,
you
yeah,
do?
there's that time. Yes.
After we, changing the subject very slightly, but after we moved the hives down to the farm where they're in a little copse of trees. Actually, it's not far from the River Thames. It's lovely, actually. You can see the narrowboats going past and so on. But I went down there one morning with Steve, who keeps bees with us, and we found one of the hives on its side and lots of bees flying around and so on. And obviously we were very worried about them. I think, as it turned out, there'd been a deer had got in there and had panicked and kicked the hive, and of course it had all fallen over.
Right.
So we very quickly got the beekeeping gear on, and I thought, I want to help these bees as much as possible. So I didn't put my boots on. Schoolboy error.
Yeah.
So there we were, sort of putting it all back together and so on. And these ungrateful bees clustered on my ankle and stung me lots and lots of times. And, my leg got quite large, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a lesson learned. 2 seconds, you really could have put your Wellingtons on. You'd been fine.
But I wanted to help the bees. They were so ungrateful.
They weren't happy bees, were they? Because they were all tipped over and there were all these cloud of bees in the air.
Wow.
And it was a real mess. I mean, they're fine.
Yeah.
It was just pick it all up, put it back together again. That's what had happened. But they were just very cross. And they just picked the nearest person.
That was me.
That was you.
I don't know if I said this on the show or not, but I use a ratcheting strap now on my hives just for that very reason. If they do get knocked over, they at least will stay together.
Yes.
Yes. That's just an idea.
Did we tell you our woodpecker story? I can't remember.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been using your bat sensor?
We have. We've actually, the bats have been quite good here. We've detected various different sorts of bats this year as well.
Cool.
Where did we go? We went on holiday this year down to the Isle of Wight, which is on the south coast, and we stayed in in an apartment in this lovely old building, which had lots of trees out the back and looked out to sea. And we, just for a bit of fun, we took the bat detector down there, and as soon as you went outside, you could hear loads of bats out there. It was fantastic. But we've had a good lot here as well, haven't we? Mm. I'm sure it'd be good down by the bees as well. There's lots of insects. So.
Cool. Julie, I've been reading your posts on Twitter, and I think you are what a lot of people are working to be or aspire to be, in that you're incredibly busy, but you're also doing a lot of things really locally and the home. You work at the is it the Amphar bookstore?
It's an Oxfam bookshop.
Sorry, Oxfam bookshop.
Yeah, it's an Oxfam one. That's like a volunteer post. We have in our local Oxfam shop, which takes clothes and things like a thrift store, like a charity store, and we also have a bookshop. And the bookshop, I don't know. Over here we have quite a tradition that second-hand bookshops have a certain slightly damp smell about them.
Yeah.
Where things have come out of people's attics. But this one is actually isn't. We clean all the books, and it has lovely blonde wood floors and little spotlights and things. And it looks like an independent bookstore that happens to be run by a charity.
Oh, I love that.
And it's great fun. I mean, the thing is, people donate things, and you just don't know what's going to be in the next bag. And you're unpacking, and that's part of the surprise. Sometimes you can just find some real little gems, real old books, 1900 and something. And there was a fabulous book we had once. It was The Complete Motor Car, and it was dated 1906.
Wow.
And it was really quite a thick book. You wouldn't have thought there'd be much to write about on motor cars in 1906, but there was. And the chapter that really got me, apart from it had lovely photos and engravings and things, somebody had actually costed out the differences between a petrol car, a steam car, and a horse and cart.
Huh?
Even down to the carbide you needed from the lamps and how much you had to pay the boy to groom the horse and all this sort of thing. And what the cost would be now, I don't know. But it was obviously for the gentleman motorist.
Wow.
And this thing about how much cars cost.
Yeah. Basically, horses cost more right now. I can tell you that.
Yeah. But at the time, I suppose they were trying to persuade the gentleman who had his horse and carriage why he should perhaps have a petrol car, and what he needed, and how they compared.
Yeah.
Fabulous book. So you get all sorts of things like that, and that's just, it's fun. It's because it's a volunteer. It means I can be here for the children. If one of my sons is off sick or something like that, it's fine. I don't have to sort of really negotiate with my boss.
Right.
Volunteer, so I can just say, I'm sorry, I can't do next week, or I can be home for the holidays or something. But it gets me out of the house, and it's just huge fun.
But you're also, just in your home, you are. I don't know what the words are, but you're always doing something really interesting, because you're baking using local ingredients like your honey. You're fixing something. You make your own beer. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we make beer. At the moment we've been making things. I've got in my head to get things ready for Christmas. So we've been down the hedgerows, and we've been picking sloes to make sloe gin, and we've been picking damsons to make damson vodka. I don't know if you've ever made these sort of liqueur things. You just need a large jar. You need the fruit. You pour a clear sort of spirit on the top, a tasteless spirit like vodka, like gin, bit of sugar, and you just shake the jar once or twice a day for a few weeks, and then you strain the fruit off, and you've got a pretty little thing that you can put in a jar to, give as a Christmas present.
Nice. That'd be like a little after dinner drink, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. You can do all sorts of things. I've also made blackberry whiskey, which sounds like a waste of whiskey, but actually it's not. It's quite a soft drink, and sloe gin is quite an English drink. Sloes are like. Do you have sloes?
No, I remember the little flasks of sloe gin. I've seen them in the liquor store.
Yeah. Sloes are, I think it's the blackthorn berry. They look like tiny plums. They're sort of a purpley thing with a slight whitish sort of cast. But they are the most acidic things you'll ever put your teeth into.
Don't eat one.
You don't eat one, because they really do, it takes all the saliva out your mouth. But they impart a lovely flavour to gin. Nice. And you just have a Kilner jar, and you just, sort of fill half the jar with sloes, a little sugar, top it up with the gin, and you just gently shake it every day, 3 or 4 months, something like that. Taste it, strain it off. You can put it in a pretty bottle, and it makes a present.
I love that kind of thing, because I'd much rather get that or a jar of pickles or something than something from the store that I might not really want or need.
Yeah, well, we have a habit of sort of I suppose it's sharing our harvest. We give a little hamper to sort of each family, and it might have honey, it might have pumpkin or something, or it might be something we've made like sloe gin or jam or mincemeat or just lavender, or something handmade.
Yeah, will
be part of the gift.
I love that.
And these days, everybody's worried about cuts, everybody's worried about money and things like that. Then that actually it saves money too.
We have a friend of ours who lives in New York State, which is basically just west of us in Connecticut, and she has been making a chutney from local ingredients. She has a bunch of orchards around where she lives. It's a beautiful country. It's just off the Hudson River. And these people have these large orchards, which they don't really harvest from anymore. So she's getting cranberries, blackberries from the brambles, and different apples and things. And she's making a chutney, and she gives it to people, but she also sells it to some stores in New York City for $12 a little jar.
Wow.
Good.
But again, it's like just making use of what is around you to make some great food. So I love that kind of thing.
Yes, very. We've got, because our village is very old, and some of the old paths out of it are extremely old. They really are tracks that people have tramped up and down with their horse and cart for centuries. And as such, the hedgerows are just full of damsons and crabapples and elderberries and blackberries. And as long as you know what you're picking, it's all there for free. You might as well use it for something.
I have a geeky claim to fame. I went out on my bike the other day down one of these tracks that Julie was just talking about, and we needed some more sloes. So I eventually found a bush and collected a few. And I wonder if I'm the first person to take the GPS coordinates of the sloe bush, so I can get back there.
Ah, Tim, you are a geek.
Why, thank you.
Oh, hold on. My phone is ringing real quick. You want to hold on?
No problem.
All right, hold on. I just had to set up. I'm going to go meet a friend of mine for a beer. So,
Important stuff.
Priorities, absolutely.
So is there anything you guys wanted to bring up?
Let's think. What else have we been doing? We've had a good chili year, haven't we? Chilies and peppers. That's gone well.
The plot's gone well, actually. There's some bits. Don't you find there's always some bits that actually need redoing? I did like a cutting garden, and we had such a hard winter last winter. Just some things have just not come up, and I've just started to look at it and think I need to redo that.
A cutting garden, like herbs and things.
Yeah, and like cut flowers for the house.
Oh, okay.
Because perhaps I don't know if it's the same over there, but certainly in this country, if you go in the supermarket and you buy flowers, so many of them have been air freighted.
Kenya or somewhere like that.
So you can obviously grow your own to cut down your flower miles as well as your food miles.
That is interesting because Heather from the Wiggly Wigglers is she has a really great audio podcast, which I've been on, everyone. But she has a thriving business selling like bird seed and things like that, and composting worms. And she has moved into having a flower shop with, I think, as many locally raised flowers as possible in the bouquets.
Yeah, we've ordered someone.
They're really nice. Heather will like me for saying this, but my mum said they were the nicest flowers she'd ever had.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're super, and that is quite a growing thing. That rather than expecting, roses in January, or seasonal blooms, as well as trying to eat seasonally, you can make sure that the flowers you have in the house are seasonal, rather than having things flown, perhaps produced in conditions that perhaps the country would be better using for their own food. That's as big an area as food growing.
Yeah, I don't know if people are aware of the carbon imprint of a lot of flowers, because some of them, they're grown either in real temperate climates like perhaps the Middle East or in South America, and they're air freighted.
Yeah, exactly.
To the northern climes. And so, I mean, air travel has the largest carbon footprint of any travel that I can think of, besides using a jet, perhaps. A rocket, I mean.
And you just think that actually, it's nice to try and grow your own.
Yep.
I've got some sunflowers in the house at the moment. We had quite a good year for sunflowers, and actually you can pick the side shoots and they're beautiful. And I've got another bunch on the table which has got like some daisy things from my garden, and actually I had some rose hips growing in the garden. I've cut a couple of branches of those and put them in, and the red hips look lovely against the yellow daisies.
Can you make a tea from the rose hips?
You can make like rose hip syrup. That's a very old thing. That's actually like in this country, that's like a World War II thing. I remember my mother telling me about collecting rose hips. They're very high in vitamin C, and being paid so many pennies for collecting pounds of rose hips.
Huh.
So it's rose hip syrup. I remember that as a child, I think.
You guys could write your own book.
Hey, I'm doing on the blog. That's where it comes from.
Oh, what is the address of your blog again?
It's fiddlesticks.uk.net.
Okay, fiddlesticks is all one word. .uk.net. That's great. That's right. So, this is the UK is different than the United States in this. In the United States, we have kind of very set property rights. Perhaps there's a lot of no trespassing signs. In my town, there's just some people that you can't go hiking on their land because they're just not very friendly. But in the UK, you said that you had went down one of these roads and found some sloes, and you just picked them. Is that just a given where if it's along the property line, along a fence row or something, you can take some of the fruit from there?
Yeah, I mean, these are very, very old tracks. I mean, the particular one I'm thinking of is an old track that went from the river up to this village. And years ago, the river was the main way that stores, food, etc., would have arrived in the village to go into the village shops. So you're talking horse and cart has tramped that way for centuries. So it's I'm sure it possibly does belong to a farmer, but there's a sort of sense that actually it doesn't, that it's a public footpath.
Uh-huh.
If anybody it belongs to like the county council or something. It doesn't have a set ownership. It's just a very, very old footpath.
I want to see that.
Oh, it's lovely. I mean, it's beautiful and there's lovely views from it. And it's just, it's just the sort of place that you go along and it's just lovely. My younger son has a metal detector, and we walked along there one day with a metal detector, and he found a really old handmade nail.
Oh, it's a lovely old iron sort of nail. It was probably 150 years old, I should think.
Yeah, probably from
Wow.
a cartwheel or something.
Yeah.
It really was a nice square-headed old, lovely old nail. And there's quite a few tracks like that I think, I'm sure, I don't know how you'd work out who owned them. I'm not sure they're just sort of common tracks that have been there so long.
I mean, maybe someone with a GPS could come and help figure that out,
Yeah, I know somebody with one of them.
When I was a kid, I was fascinated about metal detectors and finding buried treasure and stuff. And I found a couple interesting things when I was a kid. I had a metal detector, but now up in the area I live in, there's a bunch of old farms with stone walls, and we have what's called cellar holes, which were either outbuildings or houses that are just you run across in the woods. And I would like to bring a metal detector, and you might have to clear some of the brush out, but just to go across there and see what you would find. I imagine you'd find maybe hinges or nails or maybe an old pot or something. I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
We often dig up things on our allotment actually, because the whole, I mean, our village is very old. I mean, the church is doomsday listed, so people have lived here for centuries, and we've dug up some quite interesting things in our allotment, apart from the old hinges and bits of shed. But we've dug up bits of clay pipes. If you see in the old Victorian things, they have these long handled clay pipes
For smoking, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And they were as disposable as sort of cigarettes are today. So it's quite common to find the bowls or the end bits of those. And they've obviously survived, decades of being rotavated and dug.
I always feel guilty when we, dig these things up, because you think, how many times have I rotavated through there? And it's been this beautiful old clay pipe. I think the oldest one we found, they vary in design with age, and we think the oldest one is probably from the 1700s.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting. And there's all sorts of bits of pottery, aren't there, that you find. I think it was used as a rubbish heap. I'm being polite. It was used as a rubbish heap in the village. So I think any old pots or any old rubbish got chucked up there, which is partly why the ground is so fertile. But there's all sorts of old pottery and things in there.
We in the United States, particularly in the Northeast here, what some people will do is they dig out old outhouses, because basically the outhouse was where you went to the bathroom, but also where you just threw stuff.
Yeah,
and people pull out bottles and things like this.
Yeah. The allotment was used a bit like that. I think that the outhouses were periodically dug out by the owners, and then I think what was politely known as night soil was then put on the allotments, you see.
Oh, okay. It was probably very, very fertile then.
Yes, a sort of a compost
It's
type.
the composting loo predecessor,
yes,
isn't
definitely. So, of course, that's where you get, all bits of rubbish, I think, yeah.
Well, it works,
Yeah. Hey, have you heard of, I don't know if you must have got this book over in the States. There's a book that's recently come out. It was partly written by Brian May, who's the Queen guitarist.
Oh, I don't know him. Is he on American Idol?
I don't know.
you know the Bohemian Rhapsody record?
Yeah.
Ah, he played
The lead
guitar on
guitar,
that.
him.
Oh, he was on NPR here, which is kind of like the BBC of the United States.
Right.
Talking to Terry Gross. Isn't he a is he an astronomer or a physicist?
He's a fascinating guy.
But was he talking about a book to do with a village?
Yes.
Yeah, no, good. I'm glad you're watching the right bit of telly. And it's about stereoscopic photography from the 1850s.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I love stereo photography.
Okay. This is this guy called T.R. Williams, and Brian May has been collecting all the photos. And T.R. Williams had a set of photos called Scenes from Our Village. And for decades, Brian May had, collect all these things. He didn't know what village it was. There was a church and there was all this thing. It's the next village to ours.
Oh, neato.
Okay.
So for everyone listening, stereoscopic photography became very popular, could we say in the late 1800s? Would that be correct?
Yeah.
And it basically, what it does is it kind of mimics the human eyes. And we have two eyes and they're separated by about 4 inches or so. And so they're slightly separate, so you get a stereo image in your brain. So what they did is they had cameras that had 2 lenses and would expose to 2 pieces of film. And then those 2 pieces of film, you would print them onto photo paper and look at them in a viewer, a number of different kinds of viewers, and you would have a neat stereo image. And I took a stereo photography class in college and made some really cool photos.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Where I did some, I was going to school, I went to SIU Carbondale, anyone knows where that is, and I came back to New York for a vacation and I made stereo imageries of New York in the 80s, and I set really slow exposure times, so we had these neat stereo blurs. And I hope I could find those things somewhere. But anyway, there is a whole New York Stereoscopic Society, which is run by a friend of mine. But it's kind of a neat, kind of like documentary that has a bit of life to it for these older pictures. And I remember this on Fresh Air. He talked about this. That's very cool.
And it's the next village. It's actually a village called Hinton Waldres, which is the next village to ours. And what's been interesting about it is that you have these photos from the 1850s. And for us living in these villages, what's interesting is that it shows life then. And we have a local history society, and they've been going around and looking at these old photos and working out where these cottages are now. And that's been really interesting to see how the village has evolved, because these pictures just show normal life. They show people using the wells, they show people walking, weeding their allotments or their vegetables, just normal life in the 1850s. And now to sort of then translate these pictures and say, well, this is what the high street looks like now, is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
From a social history and historical point of view.
Cool.
As well as the fact that all these photos have now been said, well, this is this church and this is this village. So that's been really cool.
So, of course, I got to try taking stereoscopic photos with the iPhone, which actually worked. One of the things with Brian May's book, it comes with something that he designed called the Owl, which is a stereoscopic viewer. So it's got 2 lenses in, and you can, put that in front of the 2 pictures and build up the 3D image, which works really well. But of course, if you take a couple of two pictures yourself, just as you described, from slightly different viewpoints, perhaps 4 or 5 inches apart, and pop that into the viewer, it works really well. So yeah, I had a bit of fun taking stereoscopic photos after I saw the book, and I should try it again, actually.
It's a total blast, and it's also a neat way to get kids interested in photography, because there's a science there and there's also an art there.
Yeah.
Which I really like. So
yeah, but if you get to see the book, you can say that's the next village to ours. So
Yeah.
after 30 years, they worked out which village it was, and of course that was a huge excitement. And that's how the book got made, actually. Having discovered what village it was, that's why Brian May and there's another lady as well, I think.
Eleanor Vidal.
That's it. Went and wrote the book, and so that's just really cool.
that's great. That's totally great. He is the guitarist from Queen, who had a very popular song, Bohemian Rhapsody. And I remember, because when we paint apartments, we listen to different podcasts. and we listened to some stuff from Fresh Air, and he was on, and he's like talking about recording the different Queen recordings, and then he's a physicist or an astronomer or something like that. Somebody's super smart guy, in other words.
He is.
I really love that kind of thing. So, all right, well, cool. Well, we've like recorded a ton of stuff here, and my dogs are staring at me.
Yeah, we've got a cat waiting to be asked to go out, I think.
My pups want to eat. They just kind of stare at you, and then the one starts to kind of paw. So,
I was looking at one of the podcasts on the train yesterday, Eric, and they've grown, haven't they?
Yeah, they're full size now. They're about 75 pounds each. And they're both the same weight, but they have kind of different body styles. Charlie Pup is much more chunky and solid, and Henry is kind of more thin and lithe. They both have the same grandfather. So, but it's kind of funny because when we get all the labs together, we're related differently. You can tell the family lines. You can see who has Dozer as a dad and who has Buddy as a dad, and it's just kind of funny that way.
Cool. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for calling in.
It's great.
Well,
great,
great to talk to you.
All right. We'll have on you again. I'll see you guys.
Yeah,
take care, Eric. See you soon.
Bye.
All right. Wow. How cool is that? We should do more of this. This is just kind of fun. Anyway, I think that's almost all the time we have. I have to take the puppies out, and then I'm going to go meet a friend of mine for a beer in Williamsburg. We're going to the Abbey, if any of you guys know where that is. So thank you very much for listening. You can send us email, eric@gardenfork.tv, or Mike at gardenfork.tv. On Facebook, you can like our page. Just type in Garden Fork, and hopefully it'll show up. You can sign up for our emails. We send out an email every week. If you send an email to news@gardenfork.tv, you'll get an auto reply with a link, or come right to our site and click on the link there. And by the way, just a little shout out to Nick, who knows who he is, the programming guru. Thank you again for your help. I just really think that's kind of cool that people, just because I asked about it on the show, just kind of email and go, hey, I can help you with that. I love that. So we're working on some stuff behind the scenes under the hood, and we're going to transition to a new forum platform. It's just been, work has been really busy, but I'm trying to focus on that perhaps tomorrow. So, all right. So everyone, make it a great day. Remember, done is better than perfect. Perfection is the enemy of completion. I think that's what I'm supposed to say now. All right. So make it a great day, and I will see you later, and we'll have Mike back next week. See ya.